Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Student Leadership Conference. This is the fifth session, and it is titled Critical Conversations Talking About Mental Health. Um, just a few housekeeping items while we wait for more folks to show up. I'd ask if you can all make sure that your microphones are muted. Um, so that we don't get any background or backfeed feedback from other speakers. Also, is closed captioning available. If you go to the bottom of the Zoom, you'll see the CC icon. Just click on that and you'll be able to access it if needed. Also, let's see. The session is being recorded. It will be edited accordingly to ensure, no identifiable uh, things or um, you're not identified if should a particular topic, sensitive topic be brought up. Also, at the end there'll be, after the presentation, there'll be a time for Q&A. At the conclusion of the session, a survey will go out. And I would suggest filling out the survey because you will be entered into a chance to win some interesting items, some good raffle prizes, AirPods, a Kindle, or an air fryer. So I would say that just fill out that survey. It'll just take 2 seconds, about a minute or so, and you can feel free to fill that out. And good luck to everyone. So with that said, if you have any questions, you feel free to put them in the chat, and we will try to get to all your questions. With that said, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Linda Paradiso is an assistant professor at nursing at CUNY SPS, and she teaches nursing leadership and coordinates the graduate nursing organizational leadership program. She is a proud 3-time CUNY graduate, 2 times at the College of Staten Island, and once at Hunter College. She is a psychiatric nurse, practitioner, and board certified nurse executive. She volunteers as a member of the Vibrant Emotional Health Disaster and Crisis Response Advisory Committee and the New York State chapter of the American Psychiatric Nurses Association. And prior to joining the CUNY faculty back in 2015, Linda worked as the director of psychiatric nursing at several of New York City's hospitals. With that said, we look forward to hearing her immense background and insight to a very important topic faced not just here in New York City, but across the country. With that said, Linda, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Pat, and welcome to everyone this evening. We're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about mental health. I want to first say that sometimes when we talk about things that affect us personally or the people that we love, they can be triggering. So I just want to share that some of the content today may be triggering to people. I want to remind you that you have the option to leave, walk away, come back if you want, put me on mute, do something else, that's fine. And I also want to remind everyone that we have a wonderful counseling department here at the school. I will talk a little bit more about that when we talk about our resources. And I just want to remind you that this is something you do not have to stay the whole time. If you feel like you're getting triggered, please just leave. It's okay. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen and we'll start the presentation this evening. I'm going to try to do a little bit of, you can ask me questions at any time. And you can put them in the chat, or we can talk about it at the end. So I'm open to anything. This is quite an informal process this evening. So I am like I was introduced, I'm a psychiatric nurse. I have been a psychiatric nurse for more than 40 years. It has been my passion. Psychiatry was my passion from when I was a teenager. I didn't even realize it, looking back at some stuff I had been clearing out of my parents' house when they sold it. I found like a paper I wrote in high school about being a psychologist and stuff. But let me tell you, I am so glad I'm a nurse, because nurses are very special people. This is Nurses Month or Nurses Week, and it's also Mental Health Month. And it always makes me very proud, because we share nursing and mental health both in the same month. Education is my second career. So I like to talk, so just bear with me about that. And I am an ally, and allies are people who support other people. So I just want to make sure that everyone recognizes that no matter what it is, we need to support those who are invisible. So I'm going to first ask everyone to, Anthony's going to put in a link in the chat. And this is also a QR code that hopefully I have to move this out of the way. But this is a QR code for everyone that will take us to a poll. And I'm going to pull that poll up, and we can develop a word cloud together about why it's important. Well, like, why should we be talking about mental health? So, normalized. I love it. Yes. Relevant. Involves everyone. Absolutely. Absolutely. Crisis. Breaking stigma. Another thing that's so important, that we need to talk about the whole person when we talk about health. It absolutely is empowering to talk about what you're going through at every time. Transparency, demystify. What else are we seeing? Empowerment seems to be, so the bigger the word gets, the more it's being used. Excuse me. So empowerment is definitely something that is common to everybody and normalized. Glad to see this. We'll give it another minute, and then we will move on. Relieving, that's a good one. It is a relief of types when we get to talk about everything and no subject is taboo for us. Improvement, I like that one too. Comfort. Family health. Vulnerability erases shame. Absolutely. Community, enlightening. So this is really important. These are all really important reasons why we need to talk about mental health. So I'm going to go back now to the slides, and we'll learn a little bit about why critical conversations are important. Okay, so what is a critical conversation? So the first thing that most of us think about is that, we talked when we looked at that word cloud, we saw words like it's demystifying and empowering. But most of the time what happens is it's awkward. When we want to talk about emotions and feelings, it's awkward. It's invisible. We're talking about something that's going on with someone else that we can't see. So we can't really understand what's going on. It's sensitive, it's embarrassing, but it's very common. So we know that 7 out of 10 students are experiencing some kind of mental condition. And we want to make sure that it really turns into the normalized conversation that we were sharing just a minute ago. It's negative attitudes and behaviors that surround mental illness. And very often what happens is something we call self-stigma. We call it self-stigma because it's ourselves that are stigmatizing the conversation. We don't feel comfortable, or we're embarrassed, or we're ashamed, so we don't talk about it, and we stigmatize ourselves. And that's the first step in really talking about and normalizing our mental health and mental concerns. So it's really thinking about how we can start these conversations, because the reality is that everybody really does want to talk about what they're feeling and what they're thinking. It's just that we need to start that conversation. Why is talking important? So 88%. So if you think about 10 people, more than 8, almost 9 out of 10 college students report stress related to school life. And in our school, I have to say that it's probably 10 out of 10, because the students in our school wear many hats. We have many students. The far majority of our students are also working adults with families, with concerns that impact the stress that's related to school life. So school is just one hat that people wear, but the other important parts of our life impact everything else. We can't do one without the other. And we bring ourselves to school, just like we bring school to our lives. So when we bring ourselves everywhere, we can say that the stress is really impacted that way. If we talk about mental health, we're combating stigma just by talking about it, just by opening up that conversation, being courageous to say the words. It demonstrates concern about your whole person. As a psych nurse, I always said to people, we don't treat the neck down or the neck up. We treat the whole person. And that's really the key to breaking down stigma as well, is really thinking about life and health as a person from top to bottom, head to toe. You don't have to be an expert to talk about mental health and mental conditions. And 9 out of 10 times you will really be appreciated for asking. People really want to share what's going on with themselves. So here's another QR code. So Anthony, this is our second. And this is going to be, oh, I'm sorry, Anthony, this is number 3. I did put them out of order in the chat. So this is the Mentimeter poll 3. What are the stresses in your life? We're going to do another word cloud and see what are the common stresses in everyone's life. Because if we think about 8 out of 10, find money, absolutely. There was someone, I was listening to something recently, and they said, money can't buy you happiness, right? It's true. Money can't protect us. It's not a protection from mental health issues, but it does help us deal with them, right? It does help us deal with stress. Relationships, caring for other people, food insecurities, politics. It's so out there, right? Everybody's talking about politics, commuting, disrespect, absolutely. Time is a pressure, absolutely. Lack of compassion. It comes out in the stress for us if people aren't compassionate to our stresses, the world events, what happens in other countries. We have family in other countries, so world events is very important. A lot of us are caring for other people, whether that be children or elders or co-people like brothers, sisters, friends. It's a big deal. A lot of stress from caregiving. A lot of stress for time when you're a student in particular, putting it all together and then making sure you meet those discussion boards and hand in your assignments and work and have the time for everything. It's so true. And then add work, add family. It's so hard. So it's really important. And we can see that the two polls that we've done today so far, why is it important to talk about mental health? And then what are the stresses in your life? They are connected. Toxic bosses, that's a good one. Okay, toxic coworkers, absolutely. Absolutely. So these two issues are connected. We have all this stress, yet sometimes we're just bottling it up and we don't talk about it. And let's go back to how we can open up those conversations. Okay, some facts. It's hard to admit we need help. It's hard to say and ask for help. Depression is very common. 1 in 10 people have depression, and this is a well-known fact. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. It's the most common reason why it affects our life. This is the most common debilitating condition that affects life. 1 in 5 people live with a mental health condition. Half of those people don't get treatment. So if we think of 1 in 5, that means pretty much no one's getting treatment when we talk about half of that, right? 1 in 3 people also have an addiction or a substance use disorder. So it's very common that we're trying different reasons, different ways to make ourselves feel better. Very often substance use is one of them. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people who are young, right? Teenagers, and 15 to 24. It's the third leading cause of death. That's typically the time that we enter college. So it's really important that we think and talk about suicide as well. And I know that that may be triggering to people, and I want to let you know that we're going to be talking about this for a little bit. So if you feel like you need to step away, that's perfectly fine. 90% of the people who die from suicide, they choose to end their life, have had a mental illness sometime in their life. So how do we start the conversation? How do we bridge that big no conversation, right? The conversation that nobody wants to have. There's lots of words, but typically it's the words that are really easy to say that start it. Are you okay? What's going on? Are you stressed? Do you want to talk about what's going on? Those are just things that we, how are you, right? How many times do we say, how are you? But this time we want to say, how are you? And listen to the answer. And that's the key here when we talk about opening up those conversations, is we want to be in a place where we want to hear the answer to how are you? Are you okay? Sometimes people will not want to talk, and that's fine. But it's also important to give of yourself and say, can I sit with you? Can I stay with you for a while? Silence is okay. It is a therapeutic way of connecting with people. It's a good way of connecting with people. You really want to talk when people, we said that a lot of people, use substances when they have a mental health concern. So we want to ask them about that as well. If you know the person drinks and you see them drinking more, smoking, using, whatever, you want to acknowledge that. You want to acknowledge it in a way where you're not judging them. And that's a hard part. It's hard sometimes because sometimes we can't relate, but it's really important not to judge, just to state the behaviors. I notice you're drinking more than usual. Is something happening? I noticed that you're smoking more. People cut sometimes too, so that's part of cutting and burning. We have to think about all of that when we're opening up the conversation. And we want to say the word suicide. Do you want to ask? You want to ask those questions. Are you thinking about suicide? Do you have a plan? Can you tell me about the plan? It's really important. It's really important to put that word in particular out into the air. Some of the signs that someone may be suicidal are sometimes the words, right? People will say, they say, I really want to die. I really want to hurt myself. I really feel like killing myself. We say those words sometimes very easily, but it's important to qualify them then. If we say, I really want to, I could die. I'm so upset I could die. If you're concerned about that, you want to ask the person, do they mean it? Are they looking for ways to kill themselves? Are they searching the internet, right, for poisons, for how to obtain a gun, for other ways of killing themselves? Are they writing about death? Notes? Sometimes people, creative people in particular, you know, they write songs and poetry. Do you find anything about writing about suicide or death? Are they full of anger? You know, suicide is commonly referred to as anger turned inward. People can be very angry about what's going on in their lives and feel like there's no way out of their situation. So they're going to release themselves from it. And it's often a solution. That's the problem with suicide, is that it's really thought about as a solution to a problem, and not the fact of who they're leaving behind, but actually it's going to make the people left behind feel better. And we know that that's not true. And that's why we really want to find out the details about people's thoughts about suicide, because it's not a solution. It's not a way out. It's just a release. And that's important for us to counteract. Is the person sleeping all the time, or are they not sleeping a lot at all? Are they withdrawing and self-isolating, withdrawing from their friends, from things, that stop dropping out from school, you know, not participating in discussions anymore, dropping out from sight, nobody knows what happened to them? But, you know, that's a sign to be concerned about. Dramatic changes in mood, you know, being really, really sad. But sometimes, actually, when someone's thinking of suicide and they really feel like it is the solution, it gives them a kind of elevation to their mood that we have to be worried about. So sometimes it's the after someone's been very sad and they've elevated their mood, and and you think, oh, they're getting better. It may just be that they've made the decision to hurt or kill themselves, and that's why they seem like they're getting better. So that's a time to open up that conversation. If someone doesn't feel like they have a purpose or a reason to live, that can be a sign of suicidal thinking. And other signs, like I had mentioned before, people who cut or carve or burn themselves or other things, those are signs that they're really quite anxious and probably need to talk about suicide as well. So, Anthony, this is our second, we're a little out of order, but this is the second poll that I sent you. And this is a question: when we talk about suicide with someone and they don't have the thought, will we put that thought in their mind? Will talking about suicide make a person suicidal? Let's see what everyone knows. Will talking about it make a person suicidal? So if the person is really not feeling well, that they're depressed, they're despondent, they're sad, will us saying the word, are you suicide? Do you have suicidal thoughts? Will it make them think about it? So we have a couple of people thinking if that's true, that talking about suicide can make a person suicidal. But we have a much bigger percentage of people who say that that's false. And I'm going to say here that the people who thought that it's false are that's the correct answer. Saying the word suicide, talking about suicide with someone, doesn't make them suicidal. It does not. It often opens up that conversation and it makes a person relieved to talk about it. So let's go back to the slide and see why. Okay. Okay, so talking about suicide does not cause someone to think about it or give them the idea. They have the idea. We're just putting it out there in the open. It's a relief for the person to get that thought out and to talk about it. So asking these direct questions are very, very important. Are you feeling like killing yourself? Or have you thought about hurting yourself? Those direct questions are very important. If the person says yes, then we want to ask them some more detail, like, do they have a plan? How will they do it? When and where will they do it? We have to consider if the person has taken the steps to secure how they will kill themselves. Do they have the ability to, say, hoard pills or obtain a weapon? Many people, though, are going to also have the means to kill themselves just because we live in a place with apartment buildings. We live in places where hanging is very common, jumping is very common. There are a lot of ways that a person can hurt or kill themselves, and that's why we have to take these thoughts so seriously, because we do not need to have a weapon or hoard pills. It can be done other ways. And has the person ever tried it before? That's a really important question to ask, because people who have tried to kill themselves before have a higher risk of suicide for future. They have a higher suicide risk. So we really want to think about that. And the most important part of this is the person using? Because most people who do commit suicide or attempt to hurt them, to commit suicide, have either been drinking or using drugs prior to or at the same time. So it's really, really important, if someone is high or intoxicated, that's a risk to whether or not they're going to be actively suicidal or not. So What do we do if a person's suicidal? The most important thing to do is to take it seriously. If someone agrees and admits to it, it's really important that we hear that, because most of the time, unfortunately, it's not talked about. It's not openly discussed. Even if a person is considering hurting themselves or killing themselves, it is not something they're going to share with other people. They are feeling very ashamed. They're feeling overwhelmed. They may be feeling embarrassed for having those thoughts. They may feel like you can't relate. They may feel like no one is in their shoes and no one can understand. So it's very common that they won't talk about it. And that's why we have to think of those other signs when we're in conversation with someone else. Are there other signs besides the words that make us think about the fact that this person that we care for may be suicidal? If you ever concerned, if you have any doubt, you call 911. We live in in New York City, or 911 is a national number for emergencies. We live in New York City, where a lot of psychiatric services are available, and good psychiatric services are available. All of our health and hospitals, Bellevue, Kings County, Elmhurst, Woodhull, there's lots of places where people can get free treatment. And there's lots of places where that treatment can carry on to from an emergency room evaluation to a hospitalization if necessary, or to therapy appointments and physician appointments. So it's really important to take it seriously, and to, when in doubt, call 911. It's important to let the person know that you're concerned, and if at all possible, when you call 911, it's important to stay with the person until that help arrives. It's very often suicide is a very impulsive decision. And because it's viewed by that person as a solution, sometimes they want to get their problem solved very quickly, and that can be considered impulsive. So the person may not think through all of the rational thoughts that we have, and may try and hurt themselves because they think it's the solution, and the impulse is there. It's getting that person through the impulse, that feeling, that's really important. It's important to let people talk and to listen. You don't have to respond. Sometimes that silence is okay as well. It's really important to just show support, and being there and just bringing yourself to the situation is a supportive process. It really will help people connect to someone else, and hopefully talking out their what's making them feel this way, just saying the words out loud sometimes helps someone to problem solve themselves, right? You're just saying those words out loud, and putting our feelings into words is one of the hardest things we can ask anyone to do. So sometimes it takes quite a while. So you really want to think about that silence being a part of the process, because it's helping someone to think through their thoughts. And that's good. That's okay. So when we're talking about connecting and opening that conversation, we want to think about what is that listening going to be like, that receiving part of this interaction with someone. So it's really important for us, the person who's initiating this conversation, to be in that right frame of mind to talk. You want to make sure that you're not stressed, right? If you're stressed and then you're feeling that compassion from someone else, you're being compassionate, you're being empathetic, you're putting yourself in that person's shoes, it's going to stress you too. So it's really important to consider where you are in your life when you're going to initiate such a critical conversation. You also want to make sure you have enough time to talk it through, because it's important that when we open up a conversation like this, that we let it take its course. And sometimes, because putting those feelings into words is hard, it may be a long conversation. And make sure you're ready to hear the answers, right? This is hard stuff to hear. So you want to make sure that you're in the place where you can hear the answers and accept sometimes the thoughts about why someone needs to talk, what the stresses are that they're going through. And it's not always going to be about suicide, remember. Sometimes it's just going to be about those stresses in life, what's going on at work. We talked about toxic bosses, toxic coworkers, right? Sometimes that stress, we just need to vent out the situations that we've been in. And by talking about situations, we can actually plan how we would respond to those situations should they ever happen again in the future. We call that reflection. You think about the situation you were in, how you handled it, and then how you can handle it differently for the future. And that's an important part of these conversations as we talk about the stresses in our lives, as we talk about what may be making us feel like we can't go on, that we're completely overwhelmed. It's important that when we put those words out into the air, when we talk about them, that we think about the situation and how we can change it. The change is a really important part. When we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, we're asking a lot of ourselves. So it's really important to be at in a good frame for yourself. We want to try not to interrupt. Oftentimes, I've said this before, oftentimes these conversations are going to take time because thoughts sometimes come out very slow. Sometimes they come out really fast, and we have to help the person slow down a bit so that we can take one point at a time in that conversation, or one stress at a time. But sometimes they're going to come out very slow. And let me tell you, those slow thoughts, it's harder because many of us are not comfortable with silence. And those are the harder conversations to have, is when they're coming out, when the thoughts are coming out slowly. We want to use, when we bring ourselves to the conversation, we want to think about our body language in that conversation. Are we standing next to the door when we're having that conversation? What is that? What message is that sending the person, right? It's your 1 foot out the door type of a body language message. Are we sitting opposite them? That's a kind of, that can be considered more of a confrontational type of conversation. So the best place to be when we're talking with someone and we want them to open up, we want them to talk about what they're going through, is to sit literally next to them in the same side as they are, sit next to them. And we also want to be sensitive to the culture that we all come from someplace. We all have a culture within us. We all have a culture we live. Sometimes that culture makes these conversations even harder because it's considered bad, it's considered unhealthy, it's considered bad feelings to talk and put these concerns, to put these stresses, to put what's bothering us into words. So it's really important to consider that culture when we're having these conversations. The other part we want to think about is what not to do and what not to say, because that can shut someone down. And we want to if we want to normalize these conversations, if we want to make talking about stress, talking about pressures, talking about the anxiety we're feeling, talking about the conflicted feelings when you're a parent, you love a kid, but their behaviors make you want to hate them. When we're a caregiver for an elder and how it impacts our life, when we're having problems with our partners, when we're having problems with our friends or in school, if we want to normalize those conversations, we have to treat them with the respect that they deserve. So telling someone, oh, you can get better, is not respectful for their feelings, because most of the time we don't want these feelings. All the time we don't want negative feelings, we don't want sad feelings, anxious feelings. And if we could get better, if we could figure it out, we would. So we wouldn't have to have this conversation with someone else. If you say, if you make light of it, if you joke about it, that doesn't demonstrate the seriousness of the conversation. So you really want to avoid the humor. You want to avoid sarcastic responses. You want to avoid saying it's, oh, that's really not worth getting upset about, trivializing it. You don't want to minimize the feelings. It doesn't sound like it's worth getting upset over. That's sometimes that in and of itself can shut, that kind of conversation can shut someone down. Oh, you should hear what happened to me. Let me tell you about my stresses. That's not an encouraging conversation if you want another person to open up. You also don't want to be their parent. You don't want to try and fix for someone else. That's something that parents often try and do, is if and we call it parenting because we want to fix it instead of allowing the person to experience and come to the solution themselves. You don't want to nag and say, if you go to the gym like you usually do, you'll feel better. If you go out for dinner, you'll feel better. If you stop talking about it, you'll feel better. These things do not make people feel better. And if they could do their normal things in life, they would be. Belittling, that's another thing that we want to avoid. It's not that bad. Why is it upsetting you? You can handle it. Things like that. It does not open conversation. We also want to be careful with our own expressions and the way we hear and respond to people. Sometimes someone will open up about something that's really shocking. They might open up about something that happened to them, a trauma that happened to them that's making them feel bad. Maybe it's a sexual trauma, maybe it's a relational trauma, maybe it's a bullying or a harassment. If we are shocked by the response, and we show it, that can make the person feel like they shouldn't be talking about it, and that they want to clam up and not talk about it. So we really want to try and keep a face that just demonstrates concern. Sometimes we smile a little bit if we're feeling anxious by what we're hearing. And if that happens, or if you feel like your face may be betraying you, I think what's important here is to acknowledge that and say it. What you just shared with me shocked me. So I just need to compose myself a little bit so we can talk about it some more. It's really important to be real in these situations. You want to avoid frustrating and short-tempered responses. Like I've said a couple of times, these conversations sometimes can take a while. So you want to not only give it your time and your active attention, but you don't want it to make you feel like, oh, it's not happening fast enough. Feelings don't have time limits, unfortunately. And we want to be able to, and that's why it's important to go into the conversation knowing that it may take a while and to prepare yourself with that. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes these conversations just happen because we notice something. And if that's what happens, then we want to share that with the person too. I really want to hear about it. And make an appointment to connect again, or say, I have to go pick up my kid, but can I text you later? Or can we talk later? Or maybe, connect at school, or connect with a family member, or help them connect with someone else. So if these conversations happen that way and we feel like we don't have the time, we're not in the mental state to have it, talk about that openly. Say, I want to hear, but I don't have the time right now. And see if you can figure something out to help that person still feel supported. And don't pressure people to feel better. If they could feel better, they would. So just saying it doesn't make it happen, unfortunately. So faking it till you make it doesn't always work, right? It does. If it could work, the person wouldn't be feeling what they're feeling. So why are these conversations important? And why does it matter? A lot of us know how to do the Heimlich maneuver when someone's choking. We know how to do CPR. We've taken a course how to do CPR. We know how to put a bandage on a scrape, and put some antibiotic ointment in it. But we don't know how to talk about feelings. And we have to learn how to respond to the invisible. One of the things that really sticks with me all the time is that not everything is visible. Not every disability is visible. Not every illness is visible. So by having a bit of understanding about what we can say to start the conversation, takes that awkwardness out of the conversation. It normalizes it. We want to feel like mental health is part of the preventative care that we all know is important. As a nurse, I know that we spend a lot of money. It's one of the largest businesses in our country, the healthcare business. One of the largest. It's more than, if I remember the latest statistic, it's more than $9 trillion in business. And it's all about symptoms. It's all about fixing illnesses instead of preventing them. Instead of preventing the diabetes that is so common, instead of preventing the high cholesterol that's so common in the people who live in our country, instead of preventing depression, we're treating depression, we're treating diabetes. If we would start normalizing all these conversations, we can take that step to the prevention part. We can help people understand what's happening to them, know how to seek the support that they need. And by having a few tools in our toolbox of what to say and how to open these conversations, we can feel confident that we can help people prevent becoming mentally ill, because we're helping them prevent the things that happen to you. How to ask for help, how to seek out those supports, it's really important that we help people connect with the services that we have. The more people who start the conversation, the more normal we all are about mental health, and the more people will be helped, because mental illness is the most undertreated, underreported, and under-recognized illness of all. And it's really important that we put these conversations out there and we really start sharing. If COVID did nothing for us, it helped us to talk about stress and the importance of whole health. Whole health includes mental health. So here are some important resources for when you open up these conversations. We have a suicide lifeline. It's all we have to do is call 988. It's a 24/7 service that is national, and it's a talk, text, or chat. So all we can help someone call 988. They will get services. They will speak with a counselor, and they will be able to be connected with services immediately. Another thing we can do is we can take a mental health first aid course, and these are free. And I hope that my slide deck will be shared. I'm going to ask Reshma to share it, because these are all active links in the slide deck, and you can learn more about mental health first aid. There are many different types of mental health first aid courses. And they're all free. They are, focused on adolescents, focused on elders, focused on addictions. There's lots of ways to learn about mental health first aid. And it's really a kind of what we talked about today, starting the conversation. So as a mental health first aid responder, you'll get a certification and a little card to carry. You can feel more confident about opening up this conversation. And finally, for all the students on the call, counseling services is really important to use as a support when you're a student. Because you are seeking support through the school, it is a completely anonymous and confidential way to start treatment. It does not, our counselors do not use insurance. And I can't stress this enough, that sometimes part of the stigma and part of the embarrassment is that we don't want people to know that we're seeking services. So if that's true for a person, then you can connect them with counseling services, because it does not affect their insurance. It will not be openly shared with anyone. We don't, your school record is a completely sealed record, even from parents. No one has access to your school records. So it's really important to know that counseling services is a great way to start treatment. You can get free therapeutic appointments with people. You can see if talking about the stuff that's affecting you makes you feel better, and then you can decide if you want to go down that road. A lot of it is through telehealth, so you can do it from anywhere at any time. So it's, and the suicide lifeline, like I said, is a 24/7 toll-free, you just call, text, or chat, and you will speak with someone any time of the day or night. So this is a great quote that comes from Glenn Close. Glenn Close is an actress. She is very open about her family members being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She's very active in fighting stigma. And what she shares is that what mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation. I could not say that better. We need to talk about the stresses that we feel. We need to ask for help when we need it. And we need to know that it is okay and normal. People want to help. We want to help each other. When we help each other, it actually builds the resilience within ourselves, the helper, and the help person coming and asking for help. It's really important to take advantage of that. So that's the end of our my presentation.